The spaceship shook violently as it entered the planet's atmosphere. Inside, Dr. Aisha Khan gripped her seat tightly, her knuckles turning white. Warning lights flashed all around her, and alarms blared in her ears. This was not how her mission was supposed to go. Aisha was a xenobiologist, one of the best in the Galactic Union. She had been sent to explore a newly discovered planet on the outer edges of known space. It was supposed to be a routine mission: land, collect samples, and return home. But now, as her ship plummeted towards the planet's surface, Aisha realized that nothing about this mission would be routine. Come on," she muttered, frantically pressing buttons on the control panel. The ship's computer spoke in a calm voice that seemed out of place in the chaos. Warning: critical system failure. Prepare for emergency landing. Aisha closed her eyes and braced for impact. The ship hit the ground with a deafening crash, throwing her forward against her restraints. For a moment, everything went black. When Aisha opened her eyes, she found herself hanging upside down in her seat. The ship's interior was dark, filled with smoke and the smell of burnt electronics. With shaking hands, she unbuckled her harness and fell to what was now the ceiling of the overturned ship. "Ow," she groaned, rubbing her head. Aisha crawled towards the emergency hatch, every movement sending pain through her body. She pushed the hatch open and sunlight streamed in, momentarily blinding her. As her eyes adjusted, Aisha pulled herself out of the wreckage and got her first look at the alien world around her. The sky was a deep purple, with two suns hanging low on the horizon. Strange, twisted trees with blue leaves surrounded the crash site. In the distance, she could see mountains that seemed to glow with an inner light. "Beautiful," Aisha whispered, momentarily forgetting her predicament. But reality quickly set in as she surveyed the damage to her ship. It was a total loss. The communication array was destroyed, and most of her equipment was either broken or buried in the wreckage. Aisha felt panic rising in her chest. She was stranded on an unknown planet, millions of light years from home, with no way to call for help. She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. "Okay, Aisha," she said out loud, "you're trained for this. First things first, check your supplies." She managed to salvage some food rations, a water purifier, and a basic medkit from the ship. Her personal data pad had survived the crash, but without the ship's main computer, its usefulness was limited. Still, it was better than nothing. As Aisha set up a makeshift camp near the crash site, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The alien forest around her was eerily quiet, with none of the sounds of wildlife she would expect on a living planet. Night fell quickly, the two suns setting in a spectacular display of colors. Aisha sat by a small fire, eating one of her ration bars and trying to plan her next move. That's when she heard it. A low, rumbling sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Aisha froze, her heart pounding. The sound grew louder, and she could feel vibrations in the ground beneath her. Whatever was making that noise was big, very big. Suddenly, the trees at the edge of the clearing began to move. Aisha watched in horror as a massive creature emerged from the forest. It was unlike anything she had ever seen or studied. Its body was covered in iridescent scales that shifted colors in the firelight. Multiple limbs, each ending in razor-sharp claws, supported its enormous bulk. But it was the creature's eyes that truly terrified Aisha. There were dozens of them, covering its head in a complex pattern, all focused intently on her. Aisha's scientific mind raced, trying to categorize what she was seeing. But a more primal part of her brain was screaming at her to run. She knew, without a doubt, that she was in the presence of an apex predator. The creature took a step towards her, and Aisha scrambled backwards, her back hitting the twisted metal of her crashed ship. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. As the monster loomed over her, Aisha closed her eyes, certain that her journey was about to come to a very premature end. But the killing blow never came. After a moment, Aisha opened her eyes to find the creature's face just inches from her own. Its many eyes blinked in an unsettling rhythm, and she could feel its hot breath on her skin. Then, to Aisha's utter astonishment, the creature spoke. The words were unlike any language she had ever heard, more felt than heard, reverberating in her very bones. She didn't understand the meaning, but the tone was unmistakably one of curiosity. As fear gave way to scientific wonder, Aisha realized that her mission had just become far more interesting than she could have ever imagined. She was face to face with what might be the most dangerous predator in the galaxy, and somehow she was still alive. More than that, it seemed to want to communicate. With a shaking hand, Aisha reached out towards the creature, her scientist's curiosity overriding her fear. "Hello," she said softly. "I'm Aisha. I come in peace." The creature's eyes all blinked at once, and it made that rumbling sound again. Was it laughing? Aisha didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing for certain. This was going to be the adventure of a lifetime. Aisha's heart raced as she stared into the many eyes of the alien creature before her. The monster was huge, easily 3 times her size, with a body that seemed to shimmer and change colors in the dim light. Despite her fear, Aisha couldn't help but admire its beauty. The creature made another rumbling sound, softer this time. Aisha realized it was trying to communicate. She took a deep breath, reminding herself of her training. First contact was always delicate, especially when dealing with an unknown species. "Hello," Aisha said again, keeping her voice calm and steady. "I am Aisha. I come from a planet called Earth." She pointed to herself, then gestured to the sky. The creature tilted its massive head, its many eyes blinking in a mesmerizing pattern. Then, to Aisha's amazement, it raised one of its limbs and pointed to itself. Zix, came a deep, resonant sound that Aisha felt more than heard. "Zix," Aisha repeated, a smile spreading across her face. "It's nice to meet you, Zix." Over the next few hours, Aisha and Zix began the slow process of building a common language. Aisha used simple gestures and drawings in the dirt to convey basic concepts. Zix, she discovered, was incredibly intelligent, quickly grasping the ideas she was trying to communicate. As the alien suns began to rise, painting the sky in brilliant shades of purple and orange, Aisha realized she had been awake for over 24 hours. She was exhausted, but too excited to sleep. She had just made first contact with an entirely new species. Zix seemed to sense her fatigue. The creature made a gentle rumbling sound, and then carefully picked up Aisha in one of its massive limbs. At first, Aisha tensed, afraid she was about to become breakfast. But Zix simply carried her to a nearby cave, setting her down on a soft bed of strange, glowing moss. "Thank you," Aisha said, patting Zix's scaly hide. The creature's eyes blinked in what she was beginning to recognize as a friendly gesture. As Aisha drifted off to sleep, she heard a commotion outside the cave. Peering out, she saw several smaller creatures, similar in appearance to Zix, but only about her size, approaching cautiously. Zix made a series of complex sounds, and the smaller creatures retreated into the forest. Aisha realized that Zix must be protecting her. The thought was both comforting and terrifying. What kind of danger could there be that even Zix needed to guard against? When Aisha awoke, she found Zix still at the entrance of the cave, keeping watch. The creature turned to her, its eyes blinking in that now familiar friendly pattern. "Good morning, Zix," Aisha said, stretching. "Or whatever time of day it is here." Zix made a rumbling sound that Aisha was starting to interpret as laughter. The creature gestured for her to follow, then lumbered out of the cave. Aisha followed Zix through the alien forest. The trees here were even stranger than those near her crash site, with leaves that seemed to move on their own and bark that glowed faintly. Zix led her to a clearing where a group of the smaller creatures she had seen earlier were gathered. At first, the smaller aliens seemed frightened of Aisha, hiding behind Zix's massive form. But as Zix made a series of sounds, they slowly emerged, their many eyes blinking curiously at her. Aisha realized that this must be Zix's family or perhaps its tribe. She waved at them, smiling. "Hello," she said softly. To her surprise, one of the smaller creatures stepped forward and made a sound that was unmistakably an attempt at hello. Aisha laughed with delight. Over the next few days, Aisha's understanding of Zix and its kind grew rapidly. She learned that they were a peaceful species, despite their fearsome appearance. Their society was built on cooperation and shared knowledge, with each individual contributing their unique skills to the group. Aisha also discovered why Zix had been so protective of her. This planet was home to other truly dangerous creatures that even Zix's kind feared. But with Zix by her side, Aisha felt safe. As she sat by a fire one evening, surrounded by Zix and its family, Aisha thought about how wrong her initial impressions had been. Here, at the edge of known space, she had found not a deadly predator, but a friend. Suddenly, a loud beeping sound cut through the peaceful night. Aisha's eyes widened as she recognized it. Her emergency beacon was finally working. Help was coming. But as she looked at Zix and the others, Aisha realized she wasn't sure she wanted to be rescued anymore. She had discovered something amazing here, something that could change the galaxy's understanding of alien life forever. As the sound of approaching spacecraft filled the air, Aisha knew she had a big decision to make: stay with her new friends and continue her incredible discovery, or return to her own kind and try to convince them that everything they thought they knew about this planet was wrong. Either way, nothing would ever be the same again. The sound of the approaching spacecraft grew louder, echoing through the alien forest. Aisha looked at Zix, her heart torn between two worlds. The huge creature's many eyes blinked rapidly, showing what Aisha now recognized as concern. "It's okay," Aisha said softly, placing a hand on Zix's shimmering scales. "They're my people. They won't hurt you." But even as she said it, Aisha wasn't sure. How would her fellow humans react to Zix and its kind? Would they see past the fearsome appearance to the intelligent, gentle beings underneath? As the spacecraft broke through the canopy of twisted trees, Zix and its family retreated to the edge of the clearing. Aisha stood her ground, determined to be the bridge between these two worlds. The ship was small, clearly a rescue vessel. As it landed, Aisha saw the familiar logo of the Galactic Exploration Court on its side. The hatch opened with a hiss, and out stepped two figures in protective suits. "Dr. Khan," one of them called out, voice muffled by their helmet. "Thank goodness you're alive." Aisha waved, but didn't move closer. "I'm fine," she called back. "But before you come any closer, there's something you need to know." The two rescuers paused, finally noticing the massive shapes lurking at the edge of the clearing. Even through their protective gear, Aisha could see their bodies stiffen with fear. "Dr. Khan," the second rescuer said, voice shaking slightly, "please move away slowly. We'll cover you." Aisha saw them reach for their weapons. "No," she shouted, moving to stand between the humans and Zix's family. "They're not dangerous. They're my friends." A tense silence fell over the clearing. Aisha could feel Zix moving behind her, its massive body radiating heat. She reached back, placing a calming hand on its scales. "Please," Aisha said to the rescuers, "let me explain." Over the next hour, as the alien suns moved across the purple sky, Aisha told her story. She explained how Zix had saved her, how they had learned to communicate, and the complex society she had discovered. The rescuers listened in stunned silence, their weapons lowered but not put away. "This is incredible," one of them finally said. "But Dr. Khan, you must understand. The whole galaxy knows about this planet. It's been classified as extremely dangerous. There are warnings in every star chart." Aisha nodded. "I know, and there are dangerous creatures here, but Zix and its kind, they've been misunderstood. We have a chance to change everything we thought we knew." As if to emphasize her point, Zix slowly moved forward. The rescuers tensed, but Aisha held up a hand, asking them to wait. Zix stopped next to Aisha, and gently lowered its massive head. Then, to everyone's amazement, it began to make a series of complex sounds. Aisha listened intently, then turned to the rescuers with wide eyes. Zix is saying that their kind has been alone for a long time. They've been afraid of outsiders, hiding when ships came. But now, they want to communicate. They want to be understood. The rescuers looked at each other, then back at Aisha and Zix. Slowly, cautiously, one of them reached up and removed their helmet. "My name is Captain Lee," she said, looking up at Zix with a mixture of fear and awe. "On behalf of the Galactic Exploration Corps, I extend a hand of friendship." Zix's many eyes blinked rapidly, and it made a rumbling sound that Aisha now knew was laughter. One of its limbs reached out, carefully, and gently touched Captain Lee's outstretched hand. Aisha felt tears in her eyes as she watched. This was why she had become a xenobiologist. This moment of connection, of barriers breaking down, of new understanding blooming. But even as she celebrated this milestone, Aisha knew that the real challenge was just beginning. How would the rest of the galaxy react to this news? Would they be as open-minded as Captain Lee? Or would fear and misunderstanding threaten this fragile new friendship? As the group began to discuss next steps, Aisha made a silent promise to herself and to Zix. She would do everything in her power to ensure that this remarkable species got the chance they deserved. The chance to be known, not as the galaxy's most lethal predators, but as the intelligent, peaceful beings they truly were. The journey ahead would be difficult, but looking at the unlikely group gathered in the clearing, humans and aliens side by side, Aisha felt a surge of hope. Together, they just might change the galaxy. The news of Aisha's discovery spread through the galaxy like wildfire. Within days, the once-forgotten planet became the center of attention. Scientists, politicians, and curious beings from all corners of the galaxy turned their eyes towards this world where the supposedly most dangerous predator had befriended a human. Aisha found herself at the heart of a storm. Her days were filled with interviews, reports, and endless meetings. But through it all, she made sure to spend time with Zix and its family, continuing to learn about their culture and language. One morning, as Aisha sat with Zix, watching the alien suns rise, Captain Lee approached with a grave expression. "Dr. Khan," she said, her voice tense, "we've received a message from the Galactic Council. They're concerned about the situation here." Aisha felt a chill run down her spine. The Galactic Council was the highest authority in known space. Their word was law, and they rarely intervened directly in planetary affairs unless the situation was deemed extremely serious. "What did they say?" Aisha asked, standing up. Beside her, Zix made a low, worried sound. Captain Lee took a deep breath. "They're sending a delegation to assess the situation and to determine if this species poses a threat to galactic security." Aisha's heart sank. She looked at Zix, seeing the intelligence and gentleness in its many eyes. How could anyone see this being as a threat? "When will they arrive?" she asked. "Tomorrow," Captain Lee replied. "And Dr. Khan, they've ordered us to cease all contact with the aliens until they arrive. They want to make their own assessment without our influence." Aisha felt anger rising in her chest. "That's ridiculous. We can't just." She was interrupted by a gentle touch from Zix. The huge creature made a series of sounds, which Aisha had learned to understand over the past weeks. "Zix says it's okay," Aisha translated, her voice shaking slightly. "They understand the need for caution, but they ask for the chance to speak for themselves." Captain Lee nodded, looking relieved. "I'll relay that to the council. Maybe it will help." The next day, a large ship bearing the insignia of the Galactic Council descended from the sky. Aisha, Captain Lee, and the rest of the human team stood in a clearing, watching as a group of diverse alien beings emerged from the ship. At the forefront was a tall, slender being with shimmering blue skin, Sarlaxian, known for their logical minds and strict adherence to galactic law. It approached Aisha with measured steps. Dr. Aisha Khan, it said, its voice cool and formal. I am Counselor Zarn. We have come to evaluate the situation on this planet and determine the appropriate course of action. Aisha straightened her back, meeting the counselor's gaze. We welcome you, Counselor, but I must insist that you approach this situation with an open mind. The beings on this planet are not what we thought they were. Counselor Zarn's expression remained impassive. We shall see. Now, where are these creatures you've been communicating with? As if on cue, a rustle came from the nearby forest. Zix emerged, followed by several members of its family. The council delegation visibly tensed, some reaching for weapons. Please, Aisha said quickly, there's no need for alarm. Zix and its kind are peaceful. They wish to speak with you. Counselor Zarn's eyes widened slightly. The first show of emotion Aisha had seen from the being. You claim this creature can communicate. Aisha nodded, then turned to Zix. It's okay, she said softly. Show them what you can do. Zix stepped forward, its massive form dwarfing even the tallest members of the council delegation. Then, to everyone's amazement, it began to speak, not in its own language, but in broken, accented galactic standard. We greet you, Zix said slowly, its many eyes blinking in concentration. We wish peace. A murmur ran through the council delegation. Counselor Zarn took a step forward, its cool demeanor cracking slightly. Remarkable, it said softly. Truly remarkable. For a moment, Aisha felt hope surge through her. Maybe, just maybe, this would be enough to change the council's mind. But then Counselor Zarn turned to her, its expression hardening once more. Dr. Khan, while this is indeed impressive, it does not change the fact that this species has been classified as extremely dangerous for centuries. We cannot risk the safety of the galaxy based on a few weeks of observation. Aisha's heart sank. She opened her mouth to argue, but Counselor Zarn held up a hand to silence her. The council will conduct its own investigation, it said firmly. Until we reach a decision, this planet will be placed under quarantine. No one enters, no one leaves, including you, Dr. Khan. As the weight of the council's decision settled over the clearing, Aisha looked at Zix. The creature's many eyes met hers, filled with a mixture of sadness and determination. Whatever came next, Aisha knew they would face it together. The battle for understanding had only just begun. The days following the Galactic Council's arrival were tense. Aisha watched with growing frustration as the council members conducted their investigation, always keeping their distance from Zix and its kind. Despite her protests, she was largely kept out of the process. But Aisha wasn't one to sit idle. If the council wouldn't listen to her, she would find evidence they couldn't ignore. With Zix's help, she began to explore deeper into the planet's mysteries. One evening, as the alien sun set, casting long shadows across the twisted landscape, Zix led Aisha to a place it had never shown her before. They traveled for hours through dense forest and across glowing rivers until they reached the base of a mountain that seemed to pulse with an inner light. What is this place? Aisha asked, her voice filled with wonder. Zix made a series of complex sounds, which Aisha now understood as clearly as her own language. Ancient place, Zix said. Home of ancestors. Many stories here. As they approached the mountain, Aisha saw that its surface was covered in intricate carvings, shapes and symbols unlike anything she had ever seen before. She reached out to touch them, feeling a slight vibration under her fingers. Can you read these? She asked Zix. The creature's many eyes blinked in a pattern Aisha recognized as affirmative. Story of our people, Zix said. Long ago, when stars were young. Over the next few hours, with Zix as her guide, Aisha began to unravel the history of this misunderstood species. The carvings told a tale that spanned millennia. Long ago, Zix's ancestors had been a spacefaring race, peaceful explorers who traveled the stars. They had visited countless worlds, always seeking to learn and understand. But then they encountered another species, one driven by fear and aggression. This other race, seeing the immense size and strength of Zix's people, attacked without provocation. The peaceful giants were forced to defend themselves. Their great power turned to warfare for the first time. The battle was brief but devastating. Zix's ancestors emerged victorious, but at a terrible cost. Horrified by the destruction they had caused, even in self-defense, they made a solemn vow. They would retreat from the galaxy, hiding themselves away on this remote world. They would cultivate peace and knowledge, hoping that one day the rest of the galaxy would be ready to understand them. As Aisha listened to this tragic history, tears formed in her eyes. "All this time," she whispered, "you've been waiting for someone to listen." Zix made a low, sad sound. "Many come," it said. "All run away. You first to stay, to learn." Aisha's mind raced. This was the evidence she needed. This history changed everything. It explained why Zix's people had been seen as dangerous, why they had hidden themselves away. But it also showed their true nature, not predators, but peaceful beings who had chosen isolation over violence. "We need to show this to the Council," Aisha said, determination filling her voice. "They need to understand." But as they turned to leave the mountain, they found their path blocked. Councillor Zarn stood there, flanked by several other council members. Their expressions were unreadable. "Dr. Khan," Councillor Zarn said, its voice cool, "you were instructed to avoid contact with these creatures during our investigation." Aisha straightened her back, meeting the councillor's gaze. "With all due respect, Councillor, your investigation was flawed from the start. You can't understand Zix's people without communicating with them, without learning their history." She gestured to the mountain behind her. "This changes everything." Zix's ancestors weren't predators. They were peaceful explorers who chose isolation to avoid conflict. They'd been waiting all this time for the galaxy to be ready to understand them. For a long moment, Councillor Zarn was silent, its gaze moving from Aisha to Zix to the carved mountain. Then, slowly, it nodded. "Perhaps," it said, "we have been too hasty in our judgments. Tell us more, Dr. Khan. Tell us everything." As Aisha began to share what she had learned, she felt a surge of hope. The truth was finally coming to light, but she knew that this was just the beginning. Changing the galaxy's perception of Zix's people would be a long and challenging journey. But looking at Zix, seeing the hope in its many eyes, Aisha knew it was a journey worth taking. Together, they would rewrite history and forge a new future of understanding between species. The Galactic Council's Grand Assembly Hall was packed. Representatives from hundreds of worlds filled the tiered seats, their diverse forms a testament to the vastness of the galaxy. At the center of it all stood Aisha, feeling small but determined. Beside her, Zix towered, its massive form causing a constant murmur among the gathered beings. Councillor Zarn stepped forward, raising a hand for silence. "We are gathered here today," it announced, its voice echoing through the hall, "to discuss the fate of the species known as the Zixians, long believed to be the most dangerous predators in the galaxy." A ripple of fear and excitement passed through the crowd. Aisha took a deep breath, knowing that everything hinged on what happened next. "Dr. Aisha Khan," Councillor Zarn continued, "you have requested this hearing to present new evidence about the Zixians. You may begin." Aisha stepped forward, her heart pounding. She had practiced this speech countless times, but standing here, facing the assembled representatives of the galaxy, she felt a moment of doubt. Then she felt Zix's reassuring presence behind her, and her resolve strengthened. "Esteemed members of the Council," she began, her voice clear and strong. "For centuries, we have misunderstood the Zixians. We saw their great size and strength and assumed they were predators. We let fear cloud our judgment. But I stand before you today to tell you that we were wrong." A murmur ran through the crowd. Aisha pressed on, recounting her experiences with Zix, explaining the true history she had discovered in the mountain carvings. As she spoke, holographic images appeared around her, showing the ancient Xixian civilization, their peaceful explorations, and their tragic encounter that led to their self-imposed isolation. The Xixians are not predators, Aisha concluded. They are scholars, explorers, and peacekeepers. They chose isolation not out of aggression, but out of a deep commitment to peace. They have been waiting for us to be ready to understand them. And now, finally, we have that chance. As Aisha finished, the hall erupted in a cacophony of voices. Some representatives seemed moved by her words, while others shouted their disbelief and fear. Councillor Zarn raised its hand again for silence. "We will now hear from the Xixian representative," it announced. Zix stepped forward, its many eyes blinking nervously. The hall fell silent, every being holding their breath. "We come in peace," Zix began, its voice resonating through the hall. "Long ago, we make mistake. We cause fear. We choose to hide. But now, we want to join Galaxy again, to share knowledge, to help." The sincerity in Zix's voice was unmistakable. Even those who had been shouting moments before fell silent, watching in awe as this creature they had long feared spoke of peace and cooperation. But not everyone was convinced. A representative from a world known for its warrior culture stood up. "How can we trust them?" he demanded. "Their power is too great. They could destroy us all." Others joined in, voicing their fears and doubts. The debate raged on, with arguments flying back and forth. Aisha and Zix stood firm, answering questions, addressing concerns, and always coming back to the truth they had discovered. Hours passed. The debate showed no signs of ending. But slowly, gradually, Aisha began to notice a shift. More and more representatives were speaking in favor of the Xixians. The tide was turning. Finally, after what felt like days, Councillor Zarn called for order. "We have heard much today," it said, its voice weary but resolute. "It is clear that our understanding of the Xixians has been flawed. While concerns remain, we cannot ignore the evidence presented by Dr. Khan and the words of the Xixian representative." The hall fell silent, every being waiting with bated breath for the council's decision. "Therefore," Councillor Zarn continued, "I propose that we lift the quarantine on the Xixian homeworld. Furthermore, I suggest we establish a cultural exchange program to foster understanding between our peoples." A cheer went up from many in the hall. Others still looked uncertain, but they did not object. Aisha felt tears of joy and relief filling her eyes. She looked up at Zix, seeing the same emotions reflected in its many eyes. As the council began to discuss the details of implementing this historic decision, Aisha knew that they had achieved something monumental. They had changed the course of galactic history. There would be challenges ahead, misunderstandings to overcome, trust to be built. But they had taken the first, crucial step. The galaxy would never be the same again, and Aisha couldn't wait to see what the future held. 5 years had passed since the historic Galactic Council meeting that changed everything. Aisha stood on a balcony overlooking the sprawling city that had sprung up on the Xixian homeworld. The twisted trees and glowing rivers she had first seen upon her crash landing were still there, but now they were interwoven with buildings and roads that housed beings from all corners of the galaxy. Beside her stood Zix, its massive form a comforting presence. They had come a long way since their first fearful encounter. "Amazing, isn't it?" Aisha said, gesturing at the bustling city below. "I never imagined we'd see anything like this." Zix made a rumbling sound that Aisha now recognized as laughter. "You dream big," it said, its galactic standard much improved after years of practice. "You make this happen." Aisha smiled, but shook her head. "We did this together, old friend. All of us." As if on cue, a group of young Xixians came into view, playing with children from a dozen different species. Their laughter echoed up to the balcony, a sound that never failed to warm Aisha's heart. The past 5 years hadn't been easy. Despite the Galactic Council's decision, many worlds had been hesitant to embrace the Xixians. Fear and mistrust ran deep, and changing the perceptions of an entire galaxy took time. But slowly, steadily, progress had been made. The cultural exchange program had been a huge success. Scientists, artists, and ordinary citizens from across the galaxy had come to live and work alongside the Zixians. In turn, Zixian ambassadors had visited other worlds, sharing their knowledge and learning from others. Aisha had been at the forefront of it all, tirelessly working to bridge the gap between the Zixians and the rest of the galaxy. Her efforts had not gone unnoticed. Just last month, she had been awarded the Galactic Peace Prize, the highest honor for promoting interspecies understanding. Dr. Khan, a voice called from inside. Aisha turned to see her assistant, a young Tarlaxian named Vex. The conference is about to begin. They're waiting for you. Aisha nodded. Thank you, Vex. We'll be right there. She turned back to Zix, ready to make history again. Zix's many eyes blinked in agreement. Always ready with you, Aisha. They made their way to the grand conference hall, built to accommodate beings of all sizes. As they entered, a hush fell over the assembled crowd. Representatives from every major world in the galaxy were present, along with scientists, diplomats, and journalists. Aisha took her place at the podium, Zix standing proudly beside her. She looked out at the diverse faces before her and felt a surge of hope for the future. Distinguished guests, she began, her voice clear and strong. 5 years ago, we took a leap of faith. We chose understanding over fear, cooperation over isolation. Today, we take another step forward. She paused, letting the anticipation build. I am honored to announce that the Galactic Council has unanimously voted to offer the Zixians full membership in the Galactic Alliance. The hall erupted in cheers and applause. Aisha saw tears of joy in the eyes of many, both Zixian and non-Zixian alike. Furthermore, she continued once the noise had died down, the Zixians have agreed to share their advanced medical knowledge with all member worlds. Their unique biology, once feared, now holds the key to curing diseases we thought incurable. Another round of cheers filled the hall. Aisha felt Zix's gentle touch on her shoulder, a gesture of gratitude and friendship that needed no words. As the celebration continued around them, Aisha reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From a terrifying first encounter on a distant planet to this moment of galactic unity, it was more than she had ever dared to dream. But the journey wasn't over. There would be new challenges to face, new misunderstandings to overcome. The galaxy was vast, and there were surely other misunderstood species out there, waiting to be discovered and understood. Aisha looked up at Zix, seeing the same excitement and determination in its eyes that she felt in her heart. Whatever came next, they would face it together, human and Zixian, once feared predator and prey, now the closest of friends and partners. As the new Zixian ambassador stepped up to address the crowd, Aisha felt a profound sense of peace. They had changed the galaxy for the better, and this was only the beginning. The future, vast and unknown as the space between stars, was bright with promise, and Aisha couldn't wait to explore it, hand in hand with her unlikely friend, ready to defy expectations once again.